Easy Money was released on August 22nd, 1983, and in its opening weekend, it famously knocked National Lampoon's Vacation out of the number one spot, where it had resided for 3 weeks. Rodney Dangerfield was a famous and well-respected comic for decades before his breakout role in 1980's Caddyshack. In Easy Money, we see him return to the big screen in the lead role playing Monty, a baby photographer whose party animal gambling addict ways aren't appreciated by his wealthy mother-in-law. When she grows tired of his antics, she, spoiler alert, fakes her death, promising her $10 million department store chain fortune to her daughter and Monty, but only if he's able to reform his ways for 1 year. He faces a number of hilarious challenges along the way, which culminates in creating a successful everyman's clothing line, but leaves him realizing that money doesn't make you happy.
This is Dangerfield's first screenplay that he wrote alongside Dennis Blair, Michael Endler, and P.J. O'Rourke. Directed by James Signorelli, the film co-starred Joe Pesci, Candice Azzarra, Jeffrey Jones, Tom Noonan, Val Avery, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Taylor Negron.
Roger Ebert gave the film a mixed rating, 2.5 out of 4 stars. While Dangerfield had many funny scenes, Ebert felt the film was poorly edited and suffered by blunting the cynical and hard-edged elements of Dangerfield's stage persona in an attempt to make him more likable.
Critic Gene Siskel gave the film 3 out of 4 stars. He wrote that the big discovery is that Rodney Dangerfield, unlike most stand-up comics, does not need dialogue to be funny. He's funny just standing still, or his version of standing still, which includes nervous twitching, profuse sweating, pained expressions, and rolling of the eyes. Siskel also called Easy Money a film that's easy to like, and also praised Pesci's performance, calling him the unsung hero of Easy Money, an actor whose very appearance gives this little film a lot of class.
First impressions of Easy Money, Rodney Dangerfield and Joe Pesci.
I guess I've never seen Rodney Dangerfield's comedy or anything else he's been in.
He's a particular taste.
It took me a while to warm up to it. There were some funny bits that I liked, but a lot of the jokes, or at least some of them, don't hold up anymore.
There's definitely a few parts that do not hold up.
I also
not
a fan of the ending.
Not a huge Rodney Dangerfield fan. I know he's a very well-respected comic from his time. I feel like he's just playing Rodney Dangerfield in this movie. In fact, I was skimming the trivia. He even said that this character is probably the closest to who he is in real life, which is a little concerning. Doesn't mean he's not funny, just not quite my taste. There were some funny bits in the movie.
Yeah,
I think, honestly, the most enjoyable part for the movie for me was Joe Pesci. So that's cool, because he's what brought us to this movie. Of course, Easy Money is a replacement for Half Nelson, which we would be reviewing today had we been able to find Half Nelson anywhere. It turns out it's a made-for-TV movie, so not as easy to find as we expected.
Yes.
We should have done a little more homework on that. So we replaced it with a film that came out a couple years earlier. This was Joe Pesci's first comedy. He got to show off his comedy chops.
He was funny. I think that's why I warmed up a little bit, because of his character.
Yeah, definitely. It was fine.
It was fine.
This was a vehicle for jokes.
Yes.
That's what this movie was. Don't think we'll spend a heck of a lot of time diving deep into this movie, because there's not much to really unpack.
No.
Let's take maybe a shallow dive into Easy Money on today's 4th episode. I'm Peter.
I'm Shay.
You're listening to Stellar Alignment. Easy Money. Hi, welcome to Stellar Alignment episode 4. We will be taking a dive into Easy Money today with Mr. Rodney Dangerfield and the great Joe Pesci, who for me was the highlight of this movie.
He was the best part of that. Yeah.
Let's get started. the beginning of the movie
Was a little confusing.
right out of the gate confusing. The first thing we get is Rodney Dangerfield taking photos at a child's birthday party and asks the little girl, "How old are you?"
This many. She holds up one hand.
Five
fingers.
5 fingers, yeah. And he says, "Call me when you're this many," and flashes 20 fingers.
Yep.
So cool.
What?
Awesome start to this movie.
Wow.
Nothing like a good old-fashioned pedophile joke. That set the tone, I think, for both, because we paused the movie immediately when that happened, and we're just like, what?
What?
And that set the initial tone for us.
Then he goes up to the little girl. Who knows where these parents are right now? Who knows what his role is? Because we don't, as an audience, know quite. He's talking about why she's sad, giving her relationship advice for this other little kid that just bonked her in the head.
Yeah.
It seemed a little odd out there.
I think it's supposed to be endearing for him, but I don't think it just came off as weird because you don't really know who he is, and he just made this joke about "call me when you're 20," like,
Yeah, weird.
to a 5-year-old.
Yeah, he had a bunny hand puppet to cheer her up.
Yeah.
Or, if you were a photographer, to keep the kids looking at the camera. But he was like crouched right next to her. And this little boy, calling this little boy a mama's boy, and you deserve better and stuff. He holds up this little bunny, and a couple joints fall out of it.
Right.
Which, where are the parents? One.
Why would you store your joints inside of a puppet that you're using?
For your work.
It was just a way for them to be like,
And that puppet smells like weed.
hey.
You can probably smell him from a mile away.
Right.
Why did they even let this guy into their house?
I have no idea. That's one of my first notes. Why would anyone hire him to photograph their children?
That's a great question.
We move into an opening credits scene where we see apparently his
Portfolio. It's a mess.
He's a baby photographer.
Yes. There's a bunch of Gleason baby photos stamped on a bunch of stationery and receipts.
One of the other highlights of the movie, which is Billy Joel's song "Easy Money" playing. Okay. We see that he owes people money, that people owe him.
There's some underwear tucked
a
into
pair of
the
panties
portfolio.
that pop out. I guess it's just giving us an idea of what he does for a living. He
is a baby photographer.
Photographs children and babies for a living. Also is kind of a mess that drinks and smokes and just doesn't have his shit together.
Next scene, we see this older, wealthy woman.
We see her walk in through a department store called Monahan's, and she is Mrs. Monahan's, owner of Monahan's department store.
She's going over her agenda.
Going over a list with her assistant.
Later we find
out is named Clive, played by Jeffrey Jones, Mr. Rooney, for any Ferris Bueller's Day Off fans. He is the woman's nephew, we find out in a few scenes as well. First, he just seems like her assistant. And they're going over an agenda together, and she's making it very known to the audience that she's not a very good person.
She's like a tyrant, not caring about her employees,
like
willing to blow people off. And
alpha businesswoman, Meryl Streep and Devil Wears Prada.
Sure.
Right?
Yep. Successful because she's a hard ass.
That type of character. They're talking about having to go to her granddaughter's wedding.
She hopes that her husband will be better than the husband that her daughter chose. Cut to Rodney Dangerfield in a wedding dress.
Rodney Dangerfield in a wedding dress is funny.
Sure.
Drinking a beer.
Smoking a cigarette.
Why is he in a wedding dress? Because it's unlucky for the bride to wear the wedding dress before her wedding. I thought it was unlucky for the groom to see the bride in the wedding dress.
Yeah, you get your dress tailored. You should be the one.
You have to try it on the first time to pick it out, right?
We're getting this idea that maybe the bride is shaped like Rodney Dangerfield, which is also not the case.
No, because it's Jennifer Jason Leigh.
I
believe probably is the most notable role she's done after Fast Times at Ridgemont High at this point.
Makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it's just a way for them to put Dangerfield in a wedding dress. Because that's funny.
The mother is coming to town. She's probably going to be staying with them. It's probably going to be uncomfortable. He needs to call his friend, but he's got to fight for the bathroom from like his youngest daughter. We find out this house is full of women, his wife and his two young daughters.
And it seems to be a happy home.
Yes.
It's really just the mother-in-law who's not happy with him. He's not a great guy. He smokes weed. He makes inappropriate jokes to 5-year-olds.
He's not financially stable exactly.
Yeah, but it seems like his wife and his daughters love and care for him. Kicks his daughter out of the bathroom so he can call his buddy Nicky.
And smoke a
roach, which it was pretty... This is a funny sight gag where
There's the little roach hotel. He shakes out a roach, like a little...
Marijuana.
Ooh, like a tiny half-smoked marijuana joint. Genius.
Cool tip for anyone out there. Uses an eyelash curler as a roach clip. Interesting. Interesting use. Never seen that happen. So he calls up his buddy Nicky, who's played by Joe Pesci. And the first thing we see is Joe Pesci holding the phone up to his ear, trimming his armpit hair. Very meticulously. He's measuring them against each other.
Yes.
To see if they're the same.
Switching ears so that he can trim the next one. His hair on his head is immaculate. Is wonderful.
Yes.
Super high, not a hair out of place.
Classic greaser, very classy.
Yeah. And I started warming up around this
part. I immediately liked Joe Pesci's character. Rodney Dangerfield, I can take him or leave him. I've never been a big fan of his, but Pesci's going to save the movie for me.
He's calling Nicky to pick him up before his mother-in-law gets there. After he hangs up, he continues to like trim his armpit hair. I thought it was
He continued to do it.
Yeah, I thought it was a good
Dangerfield tosses on a shirt, heading towards the front door so he can get out of there before the mother-in-law shows up. There's a ring at the doorbell, and he thinks it's Nicky.
That was fast.
You just hung up the phone with him, like 10 seconds ago.
Could have been in the neighborhood.
But it's the mother-in-law who's at the front door.
Yeah, he's mid-cursing sentence.
I want to get out of here before my fucking mother-in-law or whatever.
Opens the door. Oh, it's her and her assistant, who we find out later is the nephew. They go tit for tat for like insults when she comes in.
Yeah.
And she ends up saying, you're an ecological menace.
Yeah. And he says, you were the inspiration for twin beds. I think they're both good lines. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The movie's funny.
Yes.
There are definitely funny parts to this movie. There's funny gags, there's bits, there's some good one-liners. It's just, as far as a movie goes, yeah.
So Nicky pulls up, he honks his horn. It's a good excuse for Dangerfield
for Monty to get out of there. And it's funny, this is the second movie with a Monty and with honors.
Yep.
And Monty and Easy Money.
Must have been a popular name.
I've never met anybody named Monty or Montgomery or anything like that. Monty's like, I gotta go to a job real quick. So they head to a photo shoot for like a 2-year-old. And then, at least in this scene, we do kind of get a little bit of a glimpse. He's good with the kid.
He's good with the kid.
He's making faces with the kid. He's getting to like, he's less of a creep now, which is maybe makes him more likable.
Endearing, yeah.
He's not a full dirtbag. Yeah. And then I think they had to go pick up the wedding cake from there.
Yes, which they have a hard time getting out the door in the first place.
It is ridiculously large and it's super unnecessary, but it's obviously a sight gag. Mm-hmm. And they're like carrying it all like...
Yep. Pesci on one side, Dangerfield on the other. They take up the whole sidewalk and...
Both hip check a woman like over the hedges.
There's 2 women on either side.
Yeah.
It's funny. I actually wrote a note. Peter grudgingly thinks this is funny.
They get the cake in the back of the van, and then they head over to Louie's bar to see their friend Louie, who's a bartender, and their buddy Patty, played by Tom Noonan, who I recognize from Last Action Hero. He plays the Ripper. He's been in a lot of other things, but that's, I think, the thing that I noticed him first. It's funny, when I watch movies as an adult, I see specific actors, and I can almost always remember the first time I remember seeing them in something. But then, of course, you find out, like, oh, they've been acting for decades in other roles. And it's just, this is one of those ones where it's like, hey, he played the Ripper in Last Action Hero. But apparently this role for this character, Patty, was originally going to be played by Bill Murray, but he didn't end up doing it.
I feel like Bill Murray would have stolen the show, too.
Possibly. The character's not... He doesn't have a lot in the movie. It actually, in 1983, like, I think Bill Murray's already becoming a pretty big star. This role kind of seems beneath him.
Small.
Yeah.
That makes sense. They're heading to the horse track to place a bet on a sure thing.
The day before his daughter's wedding, he's heading to the horse track.
Yes.
To gamble.
They're about to park. Their spot gets snaked by some bros in a tiny, faster car.
In a convertible, yeah. They pull in there, and then Monty goes, Nikki, take care of it. And he just pulls forward and pushes the convertible over into a ditch.
Yep.
And then that's it. The scene ends.
No consequences.
They place a bet.
The man in front of them takes forever. They almost don't get a bet in.
Yeah, so another bit that was just kind of funny, but...
kind of annoying.
They watch the race. The number 6 horse is in the lead by 5 lengths, right? And then all of a sudden the jockey's like pulling back on the horse and drops him all the way to last place.
Like dragging his feet.
Yeah, we're going to win. We're going to
on
win.
the ground.
And
obviously trying to throw the race.
Which is completely illegal. And then they don't cover it after that. It's like, what is this? Why would the jockey do this? It makes no sense.
I think it was just an exaggeration.
It was like, they're going to win money? Oh, they don't. No, they're not going to win money. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But for what reason? I think the only reason that they had this happen is when the jockey finishes the race and he rides by where they're sitting in the stands, Pesci jumps out and pulls him off the horse, off the carriage.
And attacks him.
And this is the first in a gag that goes throughout the movie of Pesci being a little scrapper and getting into fights. And
constantly.
Whenever Pesci gets angry and fights someone,
it is pretty funny.
It's hilarious.
It is.
In this movie and any other movie he's been in.
That's probably true.
They leave the horse track, and the next thing we know, we're at home with the family.
Who's having dinner without the father.
Right, with the mother-in-law.
It's awkward.
She's wondering where
he is.
He is.
The youngest daughter says he's at a baby shoot. What kind of baby is up at 9 o'clock at night?
And what kind of people are eating dinner at 9 o'clock at night?
Yeah, right. That too. Cut to, he's at a strip club.
Yeah. The Patty character leans over and talks to one of the dancers, and the bouncer comes over and is like, hey, what are you doing? He didn't even touch her. He's just talking to her, which is totally okay.
Probably.
It's no touchy. Not no talkie.
He invites her to have dinner with his mom.
Yeah. And so the bouncer comes over, and then Pesci's like, hey, what are you doing? That's my friend. And he gets all riled up again, like Pesci does. So, still funny. They cut back to the family and the...
mother and the daughter who's about to get married. Getting the dessert together in the kitchen. She looks a little concerned about her wedding night.
And the mom's like, didn't your father talk to you about this? Why would her father have the sex talk with her?
Weird, so weird.
The mom's like, okay, well, what do you want to know? She says, yeah, have you ever heard of foreplay?
The mom's like, no, not with your father.
And then that's kind of the end of it.
That's it. And then they go back to dinner.
They cut back to just Monty and Nikki. They're gambling. They're up a lot of money. And Nikki's like, yeah, let's walk away. And then Monty puts it down and says, double or nothing, and then loses everything, which is just another indication of just how not together he has it.
Yes.
They walk out, and Nikki's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's move on. I'm hungry. And they get in the van, and they smoke some weed, and then they drive around looking for some diners. Okay. They get to the first diner. It's closed.
Lucky's is closed.
Lucky's is closed. Go to Pop's.
So they go to Pop's. Pop's has a sign up. Pop's died. Go to Lucky's.
Yeah.
They find this other diner with the lights on.
You can see part of a sign. It says, open, see part of the word hours. The lights go off, and then they cut to the sign. It says, open 23 hours. It's just ridiculous. It's still funny. It's funny gag, but it's just dumb. They get back into the van. They're both starving. So Pesci reaches back and grabs some frosting from the cake, which, by the way, is still in the back of the van. Because the wedding is the next day. Monty says, no, what are you doing? You can't eat that. It's my daughter's cake. And Pesci says, I'm just gonna lick the bride. And Monty's like, you can't do that, that's my daughter. And he's like, it's a little plastic thing, it's not your daughter. As a stoned conversation is pretty funny.
Eventually, drunk driving leads to them ruining the cake.
They crash. And the cake is destroyed.
He does a quick stop. And he hits his head, and he says, ouch, I hit my head. And he's like laughing.
Laughing hysterically.
And I thought it was so funny. And then a car is coming.
And then a car comes and hits them.
So they have to go forward, and they crash again. And
that's when they destroy the cake. And again, no consequence. It's the next day, suddenly.
No one even talks about the cake.
No one mentions the bride's father destroyed the cake. It's just not even a thing. We're at the church for the wedding, and
Monty's hungover. He takes some Tylenol or Advil, and he downs it with holy water.
Yeah.
Just while they're standing there.
Yeah. Another silly gag is the
loud crying.
The groom's mother is just hysterically crying the whole time.
So
super
loud
and
over
annoying.
everything. Another little funny bit. He goes to give his pocket square to his wife, who is crying, and the only part of it that's cloth is the top, and the rest is a little tab that says Rent-A-Tux.
Yeah, that was funny. They don't really mention this in the movie, that this woman is his mother, but the woman sitting next to Pesci apparently is his mother, and it's Catherine Scorsese, who is Martin Scorsese's real mother, who plays Pesci's mother in Goodfellas. So a little bit of trivia there.
That's cool. After the wedding, though.
We head to the reception. Which is at their house.
At their house.
Yep.
This is the best part of the whole movie, I think. It's Rodney Dangerfield dancing. It is so great.
He's just such a spaz.
He's such a spaz.
Yeah.
I don't even like
sporadic.
How does he?
Yeah.
He
dances like that in every movie he's in. He does that. Yeah, he does it in Caddyshack.
It's so funny.
Yeah,
he just dances his way off the
that's why he does it
patio,
in every movie he's
down
in.
To the yard. He's super sweaty. He's sweaty the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's bizarre. But he's such a spaz.
And then they send the bride and groom off on their honeymoon.
Yep. Which is at a motel in town.
They get there, and she's like, our first motel room, and it's dingy, and it's got one of the vibrating beds.
Yeah,
and
like the moving beds.
Is this your honeymoon, or just to go to a shitty motel?
Yep.
Then they're cutting back and forth between them at the motel and the rest of the reception. He gets up on the stage where the band is playing, and he sings Funiculi Funicula. Funiculi Funicula. Blah, 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 blah. We're definitely going to leave that in.
Yes. Gold.
My question is, why isn't Pesci singing?
He's on stage.
Yeah. Why are we listening to Rodney Dangerfield when we have Pesci's pipes right next to him?
Missed opportunity.
Absolutely. I have a note. At least I tried to get a little bit of character depth here. And it's like, he's a man in love with living, and his mother-in-law despises him for it. Enjoys the simple things in life, like a party in your backyard and hanging out with your buddies and playing poker and, getting drunk and going to strip clubs.
Yeah.
So, the simple things in life. Smoking weed, gambling, your family's money away, making pedophile jokes, the simple things, these types of, yeah. We cut back to
honeymoon, which is funny.
I had, what does the whole honeymoon wedding night have to do with the
story
of her father? What does their whole
side story have to do with anything? It doesn't.
I think it just pads the movie. It makes the movie longer.
Yeah.
There was a funny point. They're about to consummate. She puts on some negligee and walks out. Julio, who's played by Taylor Negron, who's a pretty underrated comedic actor. He was in a lot of stuff, and he died early at 57. He's always just like a small side character, but his characters are always
pretty funny.
Yeah. Most notably for me is, and again, probably the first thing I remember him from, is Angels in the Outfield.
She's super nervous. She doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
So he tells a little story. My cousin knew a guy, and the guy went out with a virgin for 6 months. And on their wedding night, after they got married, they wanted to consummate the marriage. The woman wouldn't let him. And in the morning, they found the guy dead in the bed next to her.
They found the guy dead.
Dead.
And he's like, I don't want to die.
I don't want to die.
But she's feeling pressured, and she's never had sex, so she's scared, and he gets a little upset with her, and she ends up running back home.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the end of that there.
Middle of the night, Dangerfield is having a dream.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of talking in his sleep, and he's like, Nikki, no.
Nikki, don't do it.
Don't do it. Leave him alone. Leave him alone.
We think he's having a dream about holding Joe Pesci's character back from just getting into another scrap with someone, which is kind of funny. But the phone rings. He picks up the phone. It's the mother-in-law's lawyer, and she's died in a plane crash, apparently.
At the will reading, we find out that the assistant is actually the nephew.
Is the nephew.
The daughter's cousin.
He only gets $5,000 a year from her.
For the rest of his life.
For the rest of his life.
That's it.
Which he's very unhappy about. He thinks he deserves more. He basically works for her.
Yes.
The rest of her inheritance, which is worth $10 million, the whole department store line, she's leaving to her daughter and Monty, the family. If, this is a big if, he can stop drinking, smoking cigarettes, doing drugs, gambling, philandering, and brings his weight down to 175 pounds.
Yeah.
Which at first he's like, oh, I can't do that. And they're like, it's a $10 million. It's only a year. The note I have here is, what's the problem? You're going to get $10 million and you just have to stay sober and not gamble for a year? Get your shit together, man.
Right?
Like, how hard is that? So he's like, oh, I'll do it for my family. Like, yeah, good for you. You shouldn't have even had to think about it.
He goes to a bunch of people to get advice.
Right.
Like, and everyone's
all of his
like,
friends are like, yeah, do it. Do it for your family.
What?
And we see a very quick cameo from Frank Vincent, who also in Goodfellas with Joe Pesci, among other things. But him and Pesci also had a comedy duo in the 70s for about 5 or 6 years. Never really heard any of their stuff, but just a random thing for Frank Vincent to pop up in literally like 2 seconds. He had one quick line. Then we come to the first day that he's trying this new way of life. No smoking, drinking, eating better. One of the first things he does is steps outside, and they live in a duplex. Right next door, he sees a woman topless,
busty,
sunbathing, like super busty, unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. And of course, no philandering. He heads out front and meets her husband. And the husband casually was like, hey, I can get you whatever you need. Apparently he's a drug dealer. All of these temptations given to him right away. I thought that this was the cousin, Clive, Jeffrey Jones, was going to create these hurdles to make it even harder for him to make it a year. But then we don't see the neighbors ever again. And
one of those bits that never pop up again. Not part of the storyline.
I feel like that would have been a better movie.
Yeah.
Basically, he hangs out with other lowlifes that just drink and smoke and gamble all the time, and none of them are willing to change any of their ways, so it just makes it much harder for him.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And then after that, we've got more pedophile jokes.
That's also my next note. So.
They're in the park, Nikki and Monty, Pesci and Dangerfield, and they're talking about him needing to be a good father.
Yes.
And then they look over and they see a gentleman with his son sitting on a park bench. And he's like, take a look at this father over here. And then the next thing you see is a woman and a policeman run up to them. And they said, there's my son. And like pulls him away. And then the guy on the bench is like, he just came over and sat on my lap.
Wow. Okay.
This is, I'm going to be honest, is where my notes start to dwindle.
So there's a couple of montage scenes. Nikki setting up a stationary bike, and he goes on the stationary bike, and it becomes not stationary.
And he crashes in
the Christmas tree. You know, like little things like
just
that.
Just to show that time is going by.
Exactly.
You know, we see his youngest daughter circling the calendar for each day that he's
countdown,
sober and everything.
Julio makes a couple attempts to win back Allison.
Yeah, so the side plot that has nothing to do with the main plot.
And it's funny-ish.
They do like a, below her window thing, and his cousin comes along.
His cousin's in the bush. Every time his cousin feeds him lines or talks to him, the bush moves, like talking to him. Very funny. They sneak into the upstairs bathroom.
Right.
Just to like...
Why the cousin has to go with him,
no
I don't know.
idea.
But They get up there, and then Dangerfield tries to go into the bathroom, and they block
they
it.
literally like hold the door closed.
And then Julio's like, "We're in here."
Okay.
And then Dangerfield's just like, "Huh?" But then walks away anyways. And then the cousin heads back out the window, breaks the pipe, which has electrical connected to it, falls. It's very loud.
Very loud. Electricity and power is like sparking, and then power goes out.
And then it just cuts to the next day. Again,
no consequences.
No consequence to anything that just happened.
Random bit.
Just a random funny bit.
A lot of Joe Pesci jokes, I feel like, have been very deadpan, and he really sells it. The group are there. They're all eating like disgusting big meals, and he's got a junior salad, Dangerfield.
Yeah.
And it has like 2 olives, and it's like iceberg lettuce, and that's it. Joe Pesci, trying to be inspirational or whatever, puts out his cigarette. And he's like, this isn't going to be my master, kind of trying to encourage him. He immediately takes out another cigarette and lights it up. Young's daughter is playing the violin.
Yes.
The scales.
Playing the scales. This was a funny gag, too. She's playing the scales not well. And he's in the other room because he's trying to find something to occupy his time other than gambling and drinking and philandering. So he's building a model airplane. And as she's poorly playing the scales, he's like twitching along to the music and he's trying to paint it, but he's just following along, which is pretty funny. Like it was, they did it for a long time and it was one of those things that just became funnier the longer he did it. And then the next thing you know, he like picks up a knife and he's like pointing the knife at his face.
He's
like
out of control,
twitching it,
and it's coming closer and closer. And
then Nikki walks in and it's like, "What are you doing?" and saves him from the knife. But he's cracking up because he can't go a year without drinking and doing drugs and smoking. Like, oh my goodness.
So Pesci wants to put it in perspective. He takes him to the store that they're gonna inherit if he's successful.
Right. And Pesci needs to look for a shirt, apparently.
Oh, yep.
And they go and they talk to the salesperson, who, another weird gag, the salesperson looks exactly like the mannequin on the counter. He's dressed the same. They're both bald. He's looking for just a regular black shirt, and they don't have anything because this store is too classy.
And fancy.
And they kind of cause a ruckus. The security gets called on them. But then Monty tells them, "Tell Clive I'm here." He gets kicked upstairs to Clive, who's in a board meeting. Monty and Nikki get brought up to the meeting. Clive is kind of making fun of them a little bit.
Clive's definitely trying to manipulate something into anything that he maybe can use to humiliate him so that he kind of gives up and realizes this isn't the place for him.
You're just a
regular
low
person.
Class every man. And so they bring up this idea of like, well, if you can't find what you're looking for here, then what would you wear? And Dangerfield just tells him the type of clothing that he wears.
Yep.
So they decide, like, okay, let's make an everyman clothing line based on your styles.
So
And,
he puts the whole thing into motion.
Yeah, they
with
start
the
trying
idea
on
that
clothes.
he's going to try and embarrass him.
Yeah.
Embarrass Dangerfield.
And during this scene, they've got Dangerfield trying on clothes. They're measuring him. After that, we get an actual fashion show, right?
We do, yes.
They've created this line, and they have models, and they're at a fashion show, and they're wearing these ridiculous clothes that Dangerfield has created.
Clive invited his friends, Dangerfield's friends, but in a way that made them feel like they're just hurting his cause. So no one shows up for him in support.
The people that do show up are
snobs,
and they just laugh at all these clothes. And at this point, Monty gets fed up and he leaves, and he's like, "That's it. I'm not doing this anymore." He's over it. He's like, the money's not worth it, and he's going to go head to the bar to get drunk. He leaves, and then Julio shows up again, trying to get his wife back.
He's got a gun.
He's got a tiny little pea shooter.
It's his cousin's idea once again.
Yeah. Why
he
his
doesn't want a
cousin
gun
gets involved,
but he has a gun now.
And Dangerfield's like, "Where are you going with that gun?" And they struggle, and Dangerfield gets...
Not even struggle.
It's dumb. Dangerfield gets shot in the ass.
Cut to, he's in the hospital, bullet shot wound in his
the
ass.
butt.
Hanging.
They've got this harness underneath like his stomach and his hips.
So his ass is in the air.
Like on all fours, but he's not actually on the bed. He's like suspended just above the bed, which is just ridiculous.
So ridiculous.
This is like the big resolution.
A lot of things happen all at once.
Julio and Allison walk in, and they've made up.
Resolved. Allison is so impressed that Julio would even try to attempt murdering her father, saying
Right.
it was romantic.
Yeah.
They're super into each other again.
Clive shows up, and he's wearing...
Like a bowling shirt,
And apparently
sort of.
the Everyman clothing line actually worked, and people love it. And
It was a hit. So he's got to be in the hospital for the next 5 weeks. And
Oh.
the youngest daughter does the math and is like, that's perfect.
because then he hits his ear.
Because then he'll hit the year.
And then we see them in a yacht.
And he's super successful because he designed that line, too.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he
They're
has
on
a
the
normal
yacht,
job.
and now it seems like maybe Clive's working for them, but Clive's on the yacht. He's seasick, except they're docked.
Yeah,
Which
he's
makes no
super
sense.
seasick. Everybody else is having the time
Fine,
of their life.
but they're docked. They're not even out in the water.
Dangerfield's friends are all there, still drinking, smoking, doing
Yeah.
horrible things.
Why not? Clive leans over to puke over the side, and then we see him freak out because in walks the mother-in-law.
Ah, surprise!
It was a trick the whole time.
She was never dead.
Right?
She just manipulated him into
They
becoming
faked a
sober.
plane crash. Right. So this was her way of protecting her daughter and her
Sure,
grandkids.
sure.
And getting Monty to
Sober up and
leave his old ways. She's very proud of him. And she says, now I'll be moving in with you, and we'll make sure that you continue to do it. Cut to a mansion.
yes.
They're all sitting around having dinner, and he's having some sort of disappointing dinner that decides that
Probably.
he's going to go on a walk and then go to bed.
Yep.
And he kisses his wife goodnight, his daughter, and then goes over and kisses his mother-in-law. Good.
Very out of character. We thought it was a dream.
I thought it was
dream
either a
sequence.
dream or now he's going to leave and go meet up with the boys. And that's what happens.
He does.
He leaves and the boys are living in the basement or something.
Yeah, there's pizza, poker,
Yeah.
smoke, drink down there.
What'd you say to her this time? And he's like, oh, I just told her that her perfume was really getting to me and that I wondered if I married her daughter to get to her. Ha ha ha. And then he's like, it's funny. I used to not want to kiss my mother on the face. Now I'm kissing her ass. And then freeze frame and we cut to the credits.
Best part of the song.
Yeah, so easy money. Lots of funny bits. There's good jokes. Not a solid movie, in my opinion. Happy to see Joe Pesci again. He was only in a few minutes of Once Upon a Time in America. However, that didn't matter because Once Upon a Time in America was phenomenal. This movie, a little lighter. It was okay. It was just okay. Let's rate this movie. We weren't able to find easy money on Rotten Tomatoes. It's an older movie, and Rotten Tomatoes, I think, is painstakingly going through old movies and pulling together reviews to try and give critic reviews and audience scores. The only thing that we were able to find was Wikipedia says that Rotten Tomatoes has a 64% approval rating, which I'm not even sure what that means because that's not a term that they use. But we do have an IMDb. It's got a 6.2, which again would be basically 62%. So very close to that 64 that Wikipedia is claiming. It did really well in the box office. During my research, I think it said close to $30 million in the box office. If any of you remember, Once Upon a Time in America only made about $5.3 million in the domestic box office. So this movie made a lot more than it. For me, this is a 1 out of 12.
That will go, 1 out of 12 for me too.
For both of us.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a 1 for
Same
me
for
too,
me.
dog. We've got our bookends, though, because we both gave Once Upon a Time in America a 12, and now we've got Easy Money with a 1.
On the
So
opposite end.
now we have to find out what goes in
the
between.
middle.
It's a shame that we didn't get a chance to see Half Nelson, but we saw another
Movie that we didn't
little
see?
unknown movie that we never would have watched otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the whole point of this show, isn't it?
Yeah, whether we like it or not.
So join us next week, Thursday, of course. We will be talking about Casino,
Ooh.
which I'm super excited about. I've only seen it once. It was like
I've never seen it.
20 years ago. You've never seen it. Another Scorsese. Actually, it's going to be our first Scorsese movie.
Of this, yep.
Because we got a lot of them to come. Some more Bobby De Niro.
Cool.
And of course, the great Joe Pesci. If you're listening to us on any number of the podcast platforms to rate and review us, that really helps get us exposed to other people that might enjoy the type of podcast that we provide.
Yes.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe and like us as well, and leave a comment too. We'd love to hear from you. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you got anything else?
We're still on the lookout for our next celebrity to follow.
Yeah, we've got a few suggestions and a few ideas of our own for who we're going to follow Joe Pesci with. Mm-hmm. If you have a suggestion, we'd love to hear it. You can comment on our videos in YouTube and let us know who you think should come next. Or if you want to hit us up on Instagram, we're at Stellar Alignment Podcast. Just send us a DM. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next Thursday for Casino. Bye.
Bye.
No, we can't do that.
We can't do that. You're right.
I mean, we can. It's just a word. It's bye.
Bye.
We could do it differently, though.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
No.
You don't like that?
Bye.
No.
Why not?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Billy.
I hope you find your dad. That's not Billy, it's Buddy. Bye, buddy. I hope you find your dad. Okay, bye. Knocked National Lampoon out of the number... It famously knocked National Lampoon's Vacation out of the #1 spot. Why is that so hard to say?
Everything is hard to say.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.